Shenzhen is hosting APEC 2026, and as someone from an APEC economy country who also holds an APEC business travel card, I'm genuinely proud Shenzhen is finally getting the recognition it deserves. Shenzhen is one of my favorite cities in the world. The ecosystem here is incredible. Shenzhen's speed, the supply chain, the energy, and the Greater Bay Area connectivity. But if you're a foreigner thinking about setting up a company in Shenzhen in 2026, there's one risk you really need to be aware of, and that is the predictability of the residence permit and work permit. Let me be clear on the point of this video. I'm sharing constructive feedback based on real experience. This isn't to complain or to attack the process. The goal is to help foreigners better understand the current reality of the ground and hopefully help make Shenzhen's policies and expectations for foreign businesses clearer during APEC. That kind of clarity improves the business environment and allows more foreigners and foreign businesses to contribute to the city. Quick explainer if you're new to this. Living and working legally as a foreign founder in China has two separate parts. Firstly is the work permit. That's the Foreign Expert Bureau side. Second is the residence permit, and that's done by the Public Security Bureau, which you can basically consider as the immigration department. They're related to each other because you need both to legally work and live in China, but they're assessed separately and the durations don't necessarily match. For context, I registered my company in Shenzhen at the end of October. I'm based here, I'm doing everything by the book. I'm paying myself a salary, paying income tax, paying social security. The company is obviously issuing invoices, signing contracts, doing exports, attending trade shows, networking, doing all the right things. Like any startup, it takes time to scale and grow. In practice, you can't fully operate a Chinese company from the day you're registered anyway. The bank account took about 5 weeks due to some complications, and before the work permit process is fully completed, there's also a bit of uncertainty around what you can actually do. In my case, the work authorization and the actual right to stay didn't line up. For the first application, I was given a 6-month work permit and a 3-month residence permit. For the extension, I was given a 12-month work permit, but again, a 3-month residence permit. At the end of June, I'll need to go through this process again. The mismatch is the main challenge. The timing also made it harder because the first 3-month residence permit landed right around Chinese New Year time, and of course you couldn't do any business during that period. As renewal usually starts a month before expiry, for that first application I effectively only had 5 weeks of usable time before needing to extend it. So when the main guidance is that you're told to just provide proof of business, fair enough, but timelines and expectations need to also reflect the realities of running a startup. Business mobility. Now this is kind of the real problem I've had. Before setting up locally, I was able to enter and exit mainland China using my APEC business travel card. Once you're on a residence permit, that replaces your entry. So after doing the compliant thing, investing, registering, and basing myself here, my business mobility has actually reduced and had become less efficient due to the duration of the residence permit. So that means I'm now back in the normal foreigner queue. I can't use the APEC lane, and I can't use mainland China e-channel due to the duration not being 6 months. For someone trying to grow a business across Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and the Greater Bay Area, that really matters. Business mobility is not a luxury here, it's an essential part of day-to-day business. In April, for example, during trade show season, I went to and from Hong Kong about 5 times. That meant each time I came back into mainland China, I had to fill out an arrival card and also queue up with other foreigners because I can't use e-channel or use the APEC line anymore. It might sound minor, but the Greater Bay Area and APEC are both all about business mobility, ease of business, and cross-border accessibility. It really affects your planning, scheduling, and how efficiently you can operate your business. Of course, I could have chosen not to invest in Shenzhen, but I believe in the ecosystem and the business environment here. But if you do contribute and do things right, your business mobility should not be affected negatively. Things should be easier, not harder. So the bigger problem, I know I'm luckier than a lot of foreign founders I've met, many of which cannot get a residence permit at all. The broader challenge is that it's difficult to understand what the system is looking for in every case. Outcomes can appear inconsistent from the outside. You hear different stories from different people, and without clearer public expectations or feedback, it becomes hard to know what actually matters most. A lot of these expectations also don't seem to appear on paper. So you end up having to rely heavily on agencies, informal advice, what could be a potential rumor, or listing and connecting with other foreigners at networking events. But that just creates uncertainty for everyone involved. When expectations aren't clear, even good agencies can struggle to confidently predict outcomes. For someone trying to operate properly, that becomes a real business risk. Everyone I know that's been in this situation, they want to set up properly, they want to contribute, they want to be based in Shenzhen long term, and they don't want to be in any grey area. But when the pathway is unclear and people don't know what outcomes they can expect, it becomes harder to plan properly. I personally know people who are choosing not to incorporate business in Shenzhen right now because they think that the process and expectations are not clear enough. They're waiting till things are more understandable and predictable. Of course, it's easy to set up a company here. It can be done in about a day. But if someone is not realistically going to be eligible for a work permit or residence permit, they should know that before they spend money, time, and part of that process is renting an office for 12 months before you can even register a company. And there's a lot of costs using agencies. Basically, people can feel like they've entered the whole process without fully understanding the real risk and not being able to get the desired outcome they thought they would get. This can affect confidence among foreign investors and business people wanting to invest in Shenzhen. So now some kind of practical tips I think foreigners need to know, or practical risks they've seen. First one is the agency risk. My first work permit application was actually declined, and I believe it was because some of the office rental documents were wrong. The agency hadn't gone through these in enough detail, and there was an issue with this. Things like that can happen, but it just shows how vulnerable you are as a foreigner using an agency. I'm not blaming the agency, but it's more about process clarity and workflow. The point is that when the process is unclear, foreign founders rely heavily on third parties. If something goes wrong, the founder carries the cost of time, money, uncertainty, and stress. Also, good to point out, from what I understand, the Shenzhen government does not endorse or approve any specific agents or agencies. So if you do choose an agent, be careful who you choose and don't assume any agent can guarantee or change your outcome. The second thing I see this all over Chinese social media aimed at foreigners is these tiny offices. In general, there is a minimum square meters for renting an office, usually 10 to 15 minimum. Getting a cheap 5 square meter office is generally not going to cut it, so be careful before locking yourself into a 12-month contract. My office is actually 25 square meters. So the other point of view is I can understand why the Public Security Bureau and the Foreign Expert Bureau are being tough. Unfortunately, since after COVID, apparently there were numerous cases of foreign businesses being set up as basically shell companies with no real business substance just to get work permits. That unfortunately ruins the integrity of the system for serious operators wanting to invest in Shenzhen, but there needs to be a better way to distinguish between who is serious and who is actually just trying to game the system. I'm not asking for standards to be lowered, I'm just suggesting there needs to be a clear differentiation between the two. So why does this matter? Startup founders make rational decisions based on predictability. Until I had to go through all of this and the uncertainty of it all, I didn't even look and research Hong Kong's top talent pass scheme. But now I have looked into it. And, after going through uncertainty, huge costs with the agency, government costs, repeated short-term outcomes and stress, The comparison between Hong Kong does matter, because I'm actually eligible for the Top Talent Pass scheme. And for roughly the same overall costs, I would have been given 2 years of predictability to operate within the Greater Bay Area. That's not a threat, but it is important to know that there are other alternatives. Shenzhen does need to be aware of what other parts of the GBA are offering for people with similar backgrounds. If Shenzhen wants to attract more international founders and investors, especially from APEC economies, clarity and consistency really does matter. I want Shenzhen to be my base long term, and I do want to contribute to the ecosystem here. That's why I chose to invest here in the first place. But founders also need to manage risk realistically. If outcomes stay short term again and again, at some point you have to review your options, not emotionally, but just as a business decision. So just to close this, overall, I just think there's a real opportunity to improve clarity here in the year of APEC. Clearer expectations and clearer feedback would help foreigners understand what is needed before they invest, and it would also help agencies give more realistic guidance. More importantly, it would help Shenzhen attract more serious long-term foreign founders and investors, especially during the APEC year. So I will leave this open. If anyone from the Shenzhen government, business community, or wider Greater Bay Area wants to have a chat and wants to discuss some of the things I have seen based on many business events and talking to many people, I'd love to talk and connect. And basically, yeah, what I've seen on the ground. Let's have a conversation. Overall, the goal is simple. Let's help more serious foreigners come here, contribute properly, build real businesses, and create long-lasting cooperation with Shenzhen and the Greater Bay Area. If people find this video useful, I'll post another video kind of talking about the realities of running a business here as a foreigner. So the timelines, information about company setup, bank accounts, import-export license, overall bureaucracy, and yeah. Let me know, and thanks very much for watching. Look at this view.